Right, well, welcome everyone to the first of our state Seat of Menango candidates forums being conducted by our council this year on behalf of the people of our regional area, the people of the South Burnett, and it's our pleasure to welcome the first of our candidates into chamber to respond to the questions and share his vision for the seat of Menango with us. So I would kindly welcome Mr. Tony Scrimshaw on behalf of the One Nation Party. Welcome, Tony. And we're just going to ask Tony now to go to the podium, and we're going to Tony. We've got a series of questions there which we've shared with you. We encourage you to relax and take your time in answering those, and each question will prompt a conversation. We'll probably allocate about 45 minutes with a view to finishing up at about 10 to 6. Thanks, Tony, if that's okay with you. And we certainly welcome anyone who's watching on live stream as well. So I'm going to now hand over to Councillor Froeloff for the first of our questions. Thanks, Councillor Froeloff.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome, Tony, to the council chambers. Tony, water security and reliability is a major issue for our region. What commitments can you make to the people of our region on urban water supply for Kingaroy and the water security and reliability for industry and agriculture?
Can I just say thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for this invite on behalf of One Nation. This journey is an amazing journey for any candidate that's running for the electorate, and it's certainly a wonderful experience to meet so many people who experience the same thing. Councillor Froeloff, with water security, One Nation is going to make legislation to stop all the sale-off of water in Australia. It has to stop. We cannot afford any more of this water being sold off to overseas. We know we've got major issues. We have, for many, many years, been pushing the Bradfield scheme, and that scheme is to come down into central Queensland. The way it's been presently presented, it's going to sit up in that north. We can't afford that. It's got to be that system where we've got dams, we've got pipes. It's using natural gravity to move it down into the river systems that we need. If we have water, water grows towns. It produces productivity. The more productivity we have, the more life we're going to have in small towns. If we don't have the water, and we've seen for many, many years around here, drought. We've seen the devastation of drought for many farmers, and it's not good. So we want to make sure that there's a clear, level platform that water is for everybody. It's not for the elite. It's not for those to make money out of it and others go without. And so I've just got off the phone to say they are pushing through legislation to change the way that we have water and the way it's being sold off in Australia at the moment.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony. Move on to our second question, and that's Councillor Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for coming in, Tony. Just a question on the regarding the Bunion Mountains. It's a major tourist attraction to our region, and council has invested a money into the major intersection halfway up the from Maidenwell to the Bunions. It's regarded as one of the hotspots for tourism in southeast Queensland corner, and at the moment we have around about 2.4 kilometres of unsealed, very unpresentable road to one of our major tourist and I guess sites that certainly contribute to our economy in the South Burnett. So my question, I guess, would be, what commitment are you making to the South Burnett region and its people to seal the remainder 2.4 kilometres of the Maidenwell Bunion Mountains Road?
Thanks, Councillor Jones. Can I just first say we will not promise anything due to the budget. There is no budget that's been handed down by this present government. We have no idea what the budget is, and we certainly don't know, with the extra $100 billion on top of the deficit, it makes things difficult. However, saying that, If we are elected, I will be working very closely with all the councils in all your issues, and especially around roads. Coming out of tourism, I understand if we don't have the roads, we don't get people. And I've been travelling through many of these roads through this electorate, and I punctured a brand new tyre. So I've just spent another $200 putting another tyre on, just after putting a set of tyres on my car. So I understand that, this is very important. The Bunions is a wonderful place. And if we want to entice people to come through, we need the infrastructure. We need the roads. Without the roads, we don't get people coming through. Yes, you might get four-wheel drives, you might get the occasional caravan coming through with a four-wheel drive, but you don't have it on the same extent, okay? So infrastructure is very important, roads are very important. And the Bunions is just one of those wonderful places throughout this whole electorate that we need better roads to get people to. I've been up to Jimna Tower, another wonderful spot, coming across that mountain out to Mount Stanley, going up to the Bunions, going out past Esk and to many other places. One thing we've been let down by government is our roads. We've got too much heavy traffic on it. We've got too many heavy vehicles, and we need the heavy vehicles to go to the abattoirs. But we need these roads, don't we? We need to entice people to start travelling in this country. We have an amazing country that we live in, and everyone wants to go overseas very quickly, but if they come not even 2 hours out of Brisbane, we've got some amazing places to see right through the 4 regions or the 4 councils that we're a part of, not just the South Burnett, but Esk and so forth. And I agree with you, if we get in, we certainly will be looking at. However, saying that, once we know what the budget is, I think we need to prioritise what is the best thing first and start working through. But without a budget, it's very hard to commit to anything of substantial because of it.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. This is obviously without any warning or whatever. If One Nation was to gain power or have the say, what's yours or One Nation's thoughts on continuing? I know you've just referred to the budget and you don't know what the budget will be, but Works for Queensland been an absolute huge bonus for the rural councils of Queensland. What's One Nation's view on supporting and continuing Works for Queensland into the future?
One Nation is about supporting our rural areas non-stop. We are here for you. We're here because the rural areas have been forgotten. We know that. We're going to be basically taking over what the Nationals and other people have forgotten. And it's no fault of themselves, but when you have parties that want to just put all the money down in the southeast, where does it go? Where's the country? What's happened out here for the last 12 years, maybe longer? We've been forgotten. So we're very much about rural areas. We want to make sure that you get the right funding so we can do these projects. Because without these projects, as I said, without farming, without water, we don't have towns. How many towns do we look around Australia that's got a lack of water? It's got a lack of infrastructure. People are walking away. And you see the Murray-Darling is a great example. Some wonderful people down there. They're just crying at the knees because there's nothing down there from government. How much more do we have to put pressure on council, on our farmers, for them to stay here if we're not prepared to put that money where we're supposed to? We can't keep building cities. We can't keep expanding city roads. Simple as that. We have to think about rural, because without farming, we don't have towns. Without water, we don't exist. And I don't want to see this whole electorate, which is a wonderful electorate to be in, disappear as a dust bowl. We've got children leaving here. There's very little for children here, isn't there? When you look around, how many activities do we have for children after school? Not everybody does an outside sport. It's another example. So we need to start putting the infrastructure where it's needed into these places for our future children, for our future grandchildren. And every farmer I've spoken to, sadly, either can only afford to have one child on their property or the others have to leave. Is that what we want for the future? Without infrastructure, we need to put this money back in. We need to keep them here and we need to keep them on the land.
Right, thanks, Tony. Councillor Jones. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just noting we've talked a lot about, in our first two questions, about infrastructure and water. I was just very curious, Tony, around your views and your position following Council's work on the National Water Infrastructure Development Fund, the water feasibility studies that have been done for the North and South Burnett region, and the priority projects in which that have been nominated in those studies. Really keen to hear your views, particularly around water infrastructure and infrastructure in general.
Yep. We will work, and I will work if I get elected, especially with this water. You've done the feasibility study. That's a start. And I think that's a big start. And I applaud everybody in this council today for the work that you've done and for the people that have been a part of that. Because we can't do it as individuals, but we can do it collectively together, can't we? Because if we work together, we can achieve a lot more. But we have to bring people on board with it. We're not always going to agree with policy, and we're not always going to agree with every single person, but we need a common ground to be able to move. Because without that common ground, we can't move forward. We know that water's down. We know that BBT dam's down to what I think is about 10 or 13% now, isn't it? And it's dropping. We know that Bunduma's gone down a little bit, okay? And we know that if we use, just gone from me, Gordon Brook, okay, we know we've got problems with algae. Water is essential. So I'm happy to be working with you in this case study, to continue working in this water. We want to build dams. One Nation is about building more dams. We can't continue to have this growth of Australia, and especially Queensland, without water. You know, when you look back at the Wivenhoe Dam, and if you look at the population at the time, it's nearly doubled. It's one dam. It hasn't been, that was put in, what, in the 1980s. We've had nothing since. So we need to make sure that we've got sustainability for water. We need to have these dams areas for storage. We need to make sure that we're wise on this water, and the allocations have to be fair right across the board. I know, speaking to some farmers out this way, there was a feasibility study done, but they only did the monitoring for those who have got monitoring on their systems. So if they've got meters, that's fine. But for those who didn't have a meter, they didn't get the, when they did the study, it was unfair for them because they didn't get the allocation. And yet, when you go out past where, right out towards Ironbrook, you've got some grazers out there, but you've got growers either side of them taking that water 24/7 with no restrictions. The people in the middle are suffering. How are they going to continue to have water for their cattle if you've got that either side with no restrictions? So it's got to be fair on right across the board for everybody out there. It can't be, yes, you can have this allocation, you can run 24/7, and you say to this other group, no, you're on an allocation, but there's now this allocation. It just doesn't work. It's got to be fair. But I'm happy, if we do get elected, to be working in this space with you. I know there's a couple of places that you've been looking at.
And particularly looking at in terms of our urban water supply, Kingaroy,
that's
Gordon
right.
Brook issue particularly, and making sure that we can actually, we would like to move to a position where we don't rely on Gordon Brook. And to do that, we're going to need to be able to broker an arrangement between SEQ Water, Sun Water, still look after Stanwell, water allocation, but assign some additional allocation permanently to our council so that we, off Bunduma, so that we can rely on Bunduma, we can put the infrastructure in place that's needed to run the system off Bunduma, and then effectively then that frees up Gordon Brook, for example, to go into agricultural use. Now that was identified in the study. We'd be really keen to hear if you are in a position to influence government, if you're elected as our MP and you're in a position sitting in Parliament to influence whichever is the government of the day as to this particular decision, will you support getting the government to work with those parties I've mentioned to improve Kingaroy's water supply through additional allocation from Bunduma and supporting us financially to build an off-site storage facility? That is the crux of the matter for Kingaroy's water supply.
As I said before, One Nation is there to support any water issues that we have. We know the importance of water, okay? And we will sit down with you. Whatever government is formed, because we just don't know at this stage, we will work with ever a party that we form with. So whether it's ALP or LNP, we will work with them, okay? And we need to work together. We need to work smarter, because if we don't, we're not going to achieve these goals. We know that you, the council's gone through a bit of a time with even the water in Nanango, and that caused a bit of a rift. We've got to get this right. We've got to get this allocation right. We've got to have the storage right. We don't want to go through any more years of drought. I don't want to see any more suicides because of it. And sadly, there are some people connected with water, without water, and this is how much it affects them. We've got to get this right, okay? And any person who's going to be elected member needs to be working with our councils, working with the appropriate advocacy bodies to make sure we've got the right water. Because without it, as I said before, without water, we will become a dust bowl. And, you know, that's not good enough. So we will be working closely with whichever government's formed, and also with our elected regional councils as well. And as I said, I applaud everybody who's been involved in all this feasibility. I was going to come to a couple of meetings, wasn't able to, but I have been watching from the sidelines exactly all the work that's been going on and listening very carefully to it.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Definitely, I agree. We have to get this right, and there's a number of key priorities that we've identified in that feasibility study. Probably what I'm looking for from you is some clarity in terms of what priorities you see if you were to be elected that you could actually achieve for our region in this space. Because I agree it has to be right. Certainly your comments around what's fair across the board, as we've seen through the feasibility study, you're right, people are paying for water allocation and they're not receiving it. There's no security of the allocation in which they are paying for. So really keen for you to maybe elaborate a little bit more in terms of what looks right when it comes to water security and water infrastructure for the South Burnett region.
As I said, look, I can only work with you on the feasibility study and continue to make sure that we have the water security through dams and storage. I can't offer any finances whatsoever. And it'd probably be prudent for me to go any further with that question, because it comes down to finances. It really does. And with not knowing a budget, I've heard all these people saying, we're going to give $1 million here, and we're going to billions of dollars over here, and we're going to do another $100,000 here. Where are they getting the money from? I'd rather come back here as elected member knowing exactly what we've got and say, right, we've got now this amount of money. This is what we can do for the first stage of this water feasibility. And then we have to work through the different stages. So there's 5 stages, we have to work with 1, 2, and so forth until we're down to 5. But without money, it's very difficult to put, and I don't want to put One Nation and say, yes, we're going to do this without not knowing a budget. You know, I've done budgets in the military. I know exactly what it's like to have a budget. That's not your money. And when you do promise something with a budget, and I can give you an example down at the other side of Esk, where something was offered 2 years ago about water. 2 years later, still nothing's been done about that water. It's 2 years. So 2 years later, it's been promised. People sat in these meetings like we're sitting today, and still nothing's happened, okay? If I say I'm going to do something, I will do it. If I say I'm going to be part of something, we'll be part of something to make sure it's right. But I want to make sure that we've got the right money, the right allocations, and we've got the right budget. And I think that's only fair to say that until we know what the state of the budget is for Queensland, you know, we can't offer anything. What I can promise you is if I am elected, we will be working tirelessly to make sure that the first step of all your questions is making sure that water security is first. Okay, it has to be number 1.
Thanks,
okay.
Tony. I think you've made that clear and really appreciate that response. And we certainly understand that that's what you can do at this stage. Tony, we're going to go to Councillor Potter shortly. Did you want to stop for a drink of water, I think, at this stage? Because I know you've had to do a lot of talking, you can get a little bit dry. And we'll now hand over to Councillor Potter for the next question. Thanks, Danita.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mental health is an increasing issue across our region. So what commitment can you make to delivering improved services and funding for mental health services across the South Burnett? And furthermore, homelessness is often ignored by our state politicians, yet because of mental health and other factors, it is on the rise in our region. How would you look to address these issues?
Thanks, Councillor Potter. I had the privilege during the week to be in a forum on behalf of One Nation for Make Disability Matter. It was a wonderful experience. We had the heads of LNP, ALP, Greens, all the parties there. And because I work in disability, I've seen the frustrations in the last 2 years. I've seen, working with the local suicide prevention group, what happens with people with mental health. We are going to support the Royal Commission of Disability that's just come out. We are supporting all recommendations as One Nation, which also includes mental health. I had what I would like to see if I do get in. I'd like to see also acute beds. When I had a men's hostel over in Alice Springs, I had 4 of these beds. People with mental health came into our hostel. If they couldn't get room into the hospital, they stayed in a secure, safe place with all the supports. Before they moved into the hospital, got the treatment, they came back to us. And if they weren't from Alice Springs or another part of Australia, we made sure that when they were put on the plane, there was people up the other, supports up the other end to meet them and take them back into their community. I think what we've got to do is start looking at the regional areas with the lack of mainstream supports. And I did make that very clear in this forum the other day, that rural areas lack mainstream services. It's very hard to get a lot of people out into these areas without sometimes a bit of a golden apple or something, or you need to entice people to come out. But if you're on 70,000 here in the rural area and you're on $70,000 in a city near a beach, sadly, many of them like to have that beach area and won't come out here. Or what we've got is people come out here for a period of time and then they go back again. They're not here long term. We've got to change that. We have to make sure that our main services are just as good as the city, and they're not. People travel, as we know, down to Toowoomba. They travel to Brisbane, they travel to Gympie. And I've heard many stories and sat down with people saying that I've got mental health, but I get all the way to Toowoomba. I've sat at the hospital all day to be told there's no room and I've got to drive all the way back again. It's not good. Mental health is something that's widespread. And I did, a number of years ago, have full-blown depression. I didn't realise, understand the concept of what it meant until you have something. When you have something, you kind of understand a little bit more. My heart really saddens when I see 14-year-olds committing suicide. It's got to stop. There's a story the other day, you know, we've gone through this COVID, and sadly a family took their 2 children to the grandparents and then went and committed suicide. They couldn't cope anymore. Is that what we really want? Or do we really put this money back into where it needs to sort this issue out? Mental health is growing. It's everywhere. When I used to drive around Sydney, you'll see people, you know, in the doorways of shops at 7 o'clock in the morning. You see a line of people looking for food. I've gone through to one of the organisations here to say to the Salvation Army, you need to get emergency accommodation here. There is very little emergency accommodation. Did you know that there's no accommodation for a male with children anywhere in Australia if they get kicked out? There is nothing available for them just because they've got children. That produces mental health. It produces so much for that male. You know, where do I go? And I was trying to help one of my friends only a couple of months ago. He was in Alice Springs saying, I've got to get out of Alice Springs. I can't tell you the bigger picture, but this is what's happened. I rang around everywhere that I knew of and I couldn't get him accommodation. No accommodation on the East Coast without him having to pay. As I said, the Royal Commission's come through and One Nation will be supporting all the recommendations through that Royal Commission of Disability and Mental Health. and we certainly need to work harder. But I would like to see, and I've already been up to the hospital to ask about acute beds, and they said there's nothing in the budget. They're not going to even think about it. I think we need to change that, because though we can have all the services and we can have that immediate, and we've got groups coming into this region at the moment. I've spoken to a number of mental health services that have come in and started in Mergen. I was part of that transition months ago, talking to them about other things, and it's led to, and it's great to see them here. I think that's a start, some of these workshops, but not everybody will come to a workshop. It's very difficult. Depends what stage of your mental health will you come. So, you know, it's different for everybody else. It's different for everybody, I should say, sorry. It's different for everybody who's got a mental health, who's in that space of mental health. It is very difficult. But be rest assured that One Nation will be working very, very hard with the recommendations to make sure that they just don't focus on city, that we need to come out to rural. We need to have it. Sadly, Councillor Potter and myself have been working in the same space. We've been looking for numbers and get some statistics. It's so difficult to get statistics, isn't it? You just can't get them anywhere. And when you don't have statistics, we know that the South Burnett is one of the highest of mental health. It is a very high area for, suicide, I should say. So we need to work more in getting mainstreams. And when I was in this forum the other day, one of the biggest pushes I had was we need main services in rural areas. We need it. We can't afford to have what we've got. Some people at the moment can wait up to 18 months for different services here. 18 months, it's a long time. Or they've got to travel all the way down to the city, or they've got to go over to Toowoomba to get these services. You know, we're progressing. The whole South Burnett, these, especially down at Somerset, we attach on to the end of Gympie and also over to Toowoomba. Places are growing. Since COVID started, accommodation in places like Kilcoy and so forth have gone up 100%. They've been selling. Does that mean we've got more people coming through? We know that the NDIS has part of their NDIS plan, mental health. We know that NDIS is working very hard in that space with mental health as well. But it's the mainstream services that let them down, because unless you are diagnosed with the right diagnostic, it's very hard to get it. They're still struggling in that space with the NDIS when it comes around mental health. But they are working very hard. They know that's one of the areas they need to work on. And as I said before, we will be working with that Royal Commission that's just been released on all the plans in regards to disability and mental health.
Thank you, Tony. Right. Just your light there, Danita. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for that. We'll now hand over to Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mayor Otto, and thank you, Tony, for coming along. And I'm pleased to hear your passion about mental health, because I share your concerns. And I guess for me, it's a big part of what you've said is about probably decentralisation and looking at bringing things from the city out to the country more. I'm interested in your comments around that. And also my particular question was on that Madubba-Geelong road, but I know that to see if you would fund that particular road if you were elected. But I know that the answer before, I even asked it because you've said you obviously can't commit to any budgetary items, but just we've got issues right across our region with regards to roads like that Madubba-Geelong road. We've got a working group on it. We've got the Geelong-Chinchilla road that needs to be road train accessible. We've lost industry because of it. We've got the Proston-Madoomba road where Smithfield Feedlot wants to try and get B-doubles along there. They have to unhook. We've got issues right across our region. It was pointed out there before, the Maidenwell road, like for tourism, all of these infrastructure road issues. So just what commitment will you make to, at least if you were elected, to absolutely advocate and lobby for our region to get a bigger share of the state pie?
Yep. Thanks, Councillor Duff. I went on part of your new road the other day. So I've been travelling about 2,000 kilometres a week, travelling on all the major roads. Pretty bad, some of them, aren't they? And just love that little bit between Geelong and out towards the turn-off to Bundoomba, back into Proston. I couldn't believe how much work's been done. Heavy vehicles is going to be one of the key things that I think any member has to start fighting for, because we know that if we want industry here, if we want to have the jobs here, we have to have the roads. And we know that Kilcoy has already said they're going to expand the meatworks. So that means we're going to have more trucks coming through. That means more B doubles, doesn't it? So though I can't commit on the amount, I certainly will be an advocate to keep fighting to get these roads done. And I think we need to look at a particular route. If it comes through our region, where's the cattle coming through? Where's the pigs coming through? Where's the chickens coming through? And making sure that we've got those roads connected so we can get back down to the abattoirs. Because I don't want to see jobs gone. I don't want to see abattoirs close up because we haven't got the roads. And I don't want to see the frustration of heavy vehicle drivers. I've driven heavy vehicles. I know what it's like. I've done some amazing roads over the years, the Tanami, the Unadata, the Plenty. So if you know those roads and they don't get graded, it's corrugated. And for 40 kilometres an hour, you're just shaking up and down. If you're shaking up and down in that, say, a caravan or a coach, just imagine what that's doing to the cattle if the roads are not there. That's going to put stress on cattle. We need to have these roads. So I will make sure that if I was elected, we'll be pushing very much so to look at the whole region, look at the priority of these roads, where the mainstream heavy vehicles coming through to these abattoirs, and make sure that we start looking to get these roads done. So there's a simple way through, but it can cope with the amount of traffic that's coming through as well. I agree with you, Councillor Duff. Some of those roads are atrocious. And I used to drive that way all the way up to the mines many years ago, and pulling over and getting stone chips all in you because a heavy vehicle might come along, or other vehicles. It's not good enough. This is the 21st century. We've had so much money in our resources. It's really hard to find out where all that resource has gone, isn't it? You think, we've had billions and billions and billions of dollars. Where is it? Government's promise. I think this is one of the biggest frustrations that most people have had. They've promised and promised and promised. What I can promise you is I will be an advocate to keep fighting, because we need to put rural areas back on the map. We are not here alone. Without farming, they don't have food. Without the roads, they're not going to get the food to the dinner table, are they? And we can't continue to have the roads that we've got with the size vehicles that we've got, with the amount of production that's happening, in a lot of these abattoirs. We need to get that transport through, and we can't do it if we don't have the roads to do it. So I certainly will be fighting very hard, especially for that area to continue, because I think it's a wonderful thing. I've seen part of that completed, and I was amazed with that road, and I think that was done through the other council, wasn't it, down at Dalby or somewhere? Yeah. So we need to continue that work to make sure that those trucks can be sent through. As you said, you've lost business. One of the biggest things is about jobs. We talk about jobs, government talk about jobs. Where are the jobs? Last election, they promised 500,000 jobs. Where are they in here? I can't see the jobs. I worked away from home because there was no jobs. For most of my life here, I've been here 9 years, and I worked away from home because there was no reasonable job for me to keep here. So I worked away from my family. So I know exactly what it's like. We need to bring jobs back. We need to bring jobs back into our rural areas, and transport, the graziers, the crops growers, all those bring back people. And I'd like to see more and more local people being used, when we do fruit picking, all that sort of stuff. We need the people who are on the ground. I don't want to see any more, we need backpackers, but I want to see more of us Australians working. We're here. Why can't we be working? Why can't we be helping the farmer out and start getting this produce through? Because if we don't start getting a workforce in these rural areas, all we're going to see is the price going up. We will see it continue to go up, and we've seen that with electricity. China takes all our coal, a big chunk of it. They can produce it for about 8 cents. We triple that. That's why we've got a high cost. What we need to do with our electricity is make sure that we have low emission power stations that each state competes against each other. That'd be a good idea. Get back to how we're meant to be, right? But we don't do that. We're fighting for the cherry all the time. So, Councillor Duff, I certainly will be an advocate because I've driven heavy vehicles. I know the frustration as a heavy vehicle driver on some of these roads, and it's not comfortable, and it certainly is not comfortable for the animals to get from one place to another. We need to make sure the infrastructure is there, and we need to make sure that as a priority, our roads are the right roads.
Thank you, Tony. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly, I just wanted to touch base in terms of the Mundubra-Durong Road. If you've been out there on the border of the North and South Burnett, you'd notice quite a difference in terms of the quality of the road on the North Burnett side versus the South Burnett side. It's quite embarrassing to be quite frank with you. So the expected cost of this, it's 20 million. So it's a significant investment that we're asking for. However, this is a major freight route. And at the moment, like Councillor Duff has said, a lot of our companies are struggling because they are having to leave cattle on the side of the road for hours while they get one trailer in to go back for another. So just talking, sort of bringing all of the ideas and everything that you've just discussed back to a local level in terms of this road and in terms of empowering our local industry, what will you do in that space? How will you advocate and lobby?
As I said, we'll be making sure that we know what the budget is straight away. I know it's a lot of money. 20 million is a lot of money, okay? But in the bigger scheme of things, $20 million is very small, isn't it? For future infrastructure. If we're talking about future, it's very small. Yes, it looks a lot of money. But as I said, I don't want to commit to large amounts of money. I understand your frustration. I understand that there's a good side and a bad side. But until we have that balance of pay or we get into Parliament to see that mess of budget, we don't know what we've got. We don't know exactly how much we can give per region if there's allocations. We just don't know that. And it'd be foolish of me to say, yes, I'm going to commit to this 20 million. What I can commit to is we will keep fighting on every level to make sure that if we do get in, we look at that money and we start trying to get that money out to where it needs to be. But without a budget, as I said, it's an impossible task. It really is an impossible task. And I think you agree, you do budgets here in council. You understand what a budget is. You understand you can't please everybody, but we need to start somewhere. I've got a list that if I do get in, it's a starting list. I'd just like to share with you because I didn't know what you were achieving, but I've got a 10-point plan here, okay? And some of those is the first one, water. The second one, buy local. Support a new coal fire station that's a low emissions. We've only got 16 years for this one. We need to start thinking about the money for that one to keep it here, because if not, we lose jobs, we lose a town, we lose businesses. Upgrade and expand local roads infrastructure. Bang, straight away, what we're talking about. It's here on my plan. Build a sporting complex so we've got other things to take away from youth crime. So we've got something else that we can utilise in this area, and maybe try and get our airport a regional airport. You imagine that. We could have sporting groups and music groups flying into this area. We can bring people here. We have it. And I've heard the mayor say we need to build this infrastructure many times. We need to have the infrastructure if we are to continue to grow. I've got work with federal counterparts to co-invest and improve the mobile phone black spots. 14 kilometres out in Nanango, I've got nothing for hours on end. It's going out to where Councillor Henson, the same. It's awful. absolutely awful. So unless you have a satellite phone, which is very expensive, and I don't have one of those, it is very difficult. I understand these things. Open tourist opportunities. We've got so much to do here. These roads, this infrastructure. It's so important, isn't it? If we are to go and to build and expand what we've got. Could you imagine 2 or 3 coaches coming up a day? Can you imagine coaches going out to the wineries? I used to do Hunter Valley trips, a day trip from Sydney up to the Hunter Valley and go to several wineries in a day, and we'd be full all the time. Wouldn't it be great to try and invest in those companies down in Brisbane, Kangaroo bus lines and so forth, to get their people and come out to these regions and do a loop? So they do the wineries, they go up to the Bunyas, they go to the different places out here. It's not that far from Brisbane to do it. And if you think, Sydney is quite a big area. We used to go from Sydney to Port Stephens to see dolphins. This is not far, but we need the infrastructure. And the last of my 10-point plan is to cut red tape bureaucracy to allow locals to backburn ahead of bushfire seasons and safely manage their properties. That's a start. It's not perfect, but I can tell you it's very in line with not seeing your plan and your advocacy plan. I think it's very much in line with what you've been saying.
Thank you, Tony. It's much appreciated. We'll now hand over to Councillor Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Tony. We've touched on a lot of very important parts. We've touched on mental health, we've touched on roads, we've touched on water, and I guess what I'm going to touch on will encompass all of those and some. Agriculture is a very important part in the South Burnett. The South Burnett is a rural sector. And as you know, I'm rural. Rural's in my blood. There are so many industries within the South Burnett that have the potential to grow. I'm not going to single one out for any particular reason, but I'll relate to the pork industry and the supply chain that goes with it. They're so vital to our region and our economy here. It's massive, and their potential for growth, as is every other part of agriculture in the rural sector within not only the Burnett but in Queensland. You and your party, how are you going to help protect the likes of the pork industry from disease in the event of an outbreak? And we know within the pork industry what's talked about with disease. And at the same time help grow that sector and to perhaps try and promote other associated industries and the promotion of jobs to go along with that.
Thanks, Councillor Henson. Yeah, we do live in an agricultural area. It's so important. I was just up at a particular property the other day talking about feral animals for a start, talking about pigs, and we don't want that swine flu to get into this country. How do we eradicate some of this issue before it arrives on our shores? After speaking to Clark McGee, he's got an idea, and I'll put it past One Nation, about looking at the eradication of, through tourism, but it's also land management, working with cattlemen and different properties, looking at going into the state forest as well. Under control, where we look at the land, we look at the biodiversity of the land. We look at making sure that when we go in with guns, it's only a limited amount of people. It's not free in and all. What we do have with a lot of your farmers, if this swine flu does get in, there's a system where the government can go, you've now gone from 8 to 4, you need to eradicate it. If they can't eradicate, they'll come in 30 days later and go, now you're down to number 1. We're going to send in a helicopter or whatever means we've got, and we're going to have a whole team, and then that cost is put back on the farmer. We don't want that. I certainly don't want it, because the farmer is not going to be able to support that cost, is it? We've got to look at the way before it gets here. And we are in talks with different bodies at the moment, advocacy groups, to make sure that we keep that swine flu out of here. Very important, because if we lose that, if it comes into this country, you bet your bottom dollar we've lost our pork industry, haven't we? And we can't afford that. That's going to be families, that's going to be lives, that's going to be towns, that's going to be jobs. So I'm going to be working, if I do get elected and One Nation will, with advocacy groups, that we can look at ways to maintain and control this area. Because if we don't control it, then we could have some serious problems, especially up the top end. If you've never been up the top end, you've got the top end of Queensland, you've got Fitzroy Island, right there. You've got Papua New Guinea, and you can actually see from that island, Papua New Guinea. You can actually go out in a tinny and put your foot on a sandbank and have 1 foot in Australian waters and 1 foot in Papua New Guinean waters. A lot of people don't know that. That's how close it is. And that pork is not that far away. When those feral pigs get in here, we've got problems, haven't we? So we need to work with all the advocacy groups very, very strongly. We need to make sure that we have a pathway that's clear. But I think we can do it in several ways. After having this conversation the other day, that we can introduce some tourism with it to eradicate some of these animals so we don't affect our industry with the pork industry. What they also do, they've got all the scientific proof of what they've been doing. His grandfather was a hunter, and if you remember back in the 60s and before that, we had a major issue with water buffalo. His father was one of those hunters that took out the water buffalo at the top end through all those wetlands, okay, and started eradicating. It worked. We need to make sure that we start working now. So if we are elected, we need to start working from day one with all the advocacy groups to make sure that we secure this industry. Because if we don't, we know the answers. And I don't want, for one, we've got a big industry with pork here. We've got our big abattoir. I think it's about 900 staff now, if I remember rightly. See that go, that'd be disastrous, wouldn't it? It'd be disastrous. That means 900 jobs, that means families, that means schools, that means businesses, that means a whole range of things. But I can't put a cost to it, but I have been in talks with, as I said, different people to look at ways of how we can do things better. Victoria, you can go into your national parks down there, and sadly, it's not monitored too well, and a lot of Australian animals can be shot. We don't want that. Let's work with farmers. Let's work with eradicating some of these feral animals, but let's do it in a way that we can open up a way that we work with scientists. We look with land management. We look at the biodiversity of the land, and what this particular organisation is doing, they tag every single animal. They know exactly every single animal that they get rid of. And I think if we do that, we're going to secure and make sure our biosecurity of our farming is going to be safe. I did work in Ireland many years ago when they had the swine flu, I think, came through, and we had pads at every, because over there you've got to go on trucks, you've got to go through several countries to get to where you're going. So I worked in Ireland, for instance. I had 3 ferries to get across to get over to the mainland to Europe. They had pads and all their security for every vehicle coming in and out. Even the trucks, when they're coming off the ferries, there was pads that they washed through pads to make sure the spread wasn't going to go anywhere into that country. I don't think we've got anything like that here, have we?
Tony, could I just interrupt there? And I think that's a really comprehensive answer, and thank you very much for that. Just conscious of time, so if you don't mind. Tony, just the last question, if I could put that to you. So the LNP have under Deb Freckleton indicated they'll make sure that people contracted to government are paid on time. And what will you do for small business in our community to help job growth and support our local economies? Have you got any ideas that we can look forward to?
Talking to a business person down at Esk, they've got several properties down there. And what they've done is they've reduced the rent. And by reducing the rent, they haven't lost one business. And every place down there is got somebody in it. If we keep putting rent up, all you can do is drive somebody out. And you just got to go over to the shopping centre and see how many shops are closed up. rent can kill a shop. It can kill something. If we don't have all these things we've talked about tonight, if we don't have the water, if we don't have the infrastructure, if we don't continue to work in these spaces, then you're not going to have a town. Because if the farmers don't produce, they're not going to spend. They're going to leave. So we need to make sure that what we do, especially with small business, is shop locally. A lot of people like to shop online, and that's great if you want to shop online, but when you shop online, you do a lot of damage. We need to shop locally. We shop locally, we can keep people in jobs, we can keep the families here, we can keep the businesses open. But we've got to be very mindful that when you put up high rent and you're not prepared to bring that rent down for a period of time, then a lot of businesses might shut their doors. And as I said, I was talking to a business down in Esk, and they've got lots and lots of property down there, and they've kept the price down, and that place is buzzing. You go down there weekends during the week, there's always somebody or groups of people coming in and walking up and down the street. I don't have all the options because I don't know how every business works, but I think we need to work together. We need to make sure that, the cost of electricity starts to come down, because that's another killer for businesses, especially for dairy. We need to look at all these other issues that compound a business that is a cost. And if we don't start sorting these out at state level to bring those costs down for the business person, then they're going to shut the doors, and I don't want to see that. So we need to work very hard on making sure that we've got cheaper electricity. But while we've only got one supplier here, that makes it very difficult. So we need to make sure that we have an open market, even in rural areas where people have got other options. Because without choice and control, okay, it makes it very difficult for many, many people.
Thanks, Tony. Tony, just one final comment, a question, if I could, and we do have to wrap up shortly. We have to change over for the next candidate. But just following up on what Councillor Jones asked you in relation to Works for Queensland. Now, our council, as many regional councils have received a significant amount of money under what we believe has been a very successful Works for Queensland program. That has enabled us to put many facilities, a lot of infrastructure in place around our communities over the last 4 years. It gives us a lot of flexibility. It's enabled us to provide jobs, to create new jobs. If you are in a position where you have influence over the government of the day, will you support the continuance of the level of funding through the Works for Queensland program?
Very much so.
And will you stand against any attempts to erode the Works for Queensland funding base? And that's a quick question.
Yeah, that's right.
A yes or no answer, if we could.
Yeah, if I was elected, I'd certainly be working very hard, because I don't want to see money taken out of rural areas to put into a city area. It's got to stop. We need to keep this infrastructure going. We need to keep that body of money going, and we need to keep it in our area, rural areas, if we are to continue to grow.
Thank you, Tony. Well, we'll certainly be relying on that should you be in that position. We can't afford any cuts to our Works for Queensland program, and we would, as our local member, should you be in that position, we'd be certainly on your case in relation to that. So, look, we are going to have to wrap up. Sorry, Councillor Shoemaker, it's 5:53. We need 5 minutes to change over technology, Mr CEO. Can I say on behalf of Council, Tony, thank you very much for coming in at short notice and for delivering such comprehensive responses to our question. Very much appreciated. And we wish you all the best.